Welcome to Making Greater Victoria a world-leading blue carbon hub. This session is part of the 4th annual Rising Economy Conference, an immersive virtual and in-person event hosted by the South Island Prosperity Partnership. My name is Holly Courtwright, and I'm the president of the Esquimalt Chamber of Commerce. I'm here on behalf of the entire Chamber board and our members. Given our unique location, diverse business base, we are very excited to engage and support the growth of blue carbon. In a moment, I will turn things over to our speakers, but first, a quick overview of the format. About halfway through the conversation, we'll be taking your questions for our speakers. You can submit a question at any time through the Zoom Q&A below this video. This session is being recorded, and you can submit your questions anonymously if you prefer. To interact with attendees, you can use the Zoom or Wova chat. The production team will monitor the Wova chat and Q&A for those joining us through the app. Finally, if you're posting your takeaways to social media, please use the hashtag #RisingEconomy2024. Our moderator today is Jason Goldsworthy, Executive Director of COAST, the Center for Ocean Applied Sustainable Technologies, an initiative of the South Island Prosperity Partnership. With over 20 years of international experience in managing engineering businesses and projects, Jason brings leadership, technical, and commercial aptitude to the team. His experience spans multiple industries, including renewable energy, urban development, environmental consulting, mining, and commercial and infrastructure construction. Jason holds a PhD in engineering from the University of Adelaide, Australia, and is a member of the Professional Engineers and Geoscientists of British Columbia. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you, Holly, and thank you for that wonderful welcome. Hello, everyone, and I'm privileged to be here today to chat with you on this session regarding the opportunities for this region to become a world leader in blue carbon or marine carbon dioxide removal. We'll probably use those terms interchangeably a little bit, but what I'd like to do first before getting into our speakers and panelists is just share a little bit about COAST. As Holly mentioned, COAST is the Centre for Ocean Applied Sustainable Technologies, and we're the innovation hub for the blue economy in Pacific Canada. As Holly mentioned, COAST is an initiative of the South Island Prosperity Partnership, and we exist to help industry find new commercial solutions to key challenges facing the oceans. We support startups and new ventures commercialise their innovations. We engage with Indigenous leadership in ocean innovation, and we attract talent, capital and partnerships to grow businesses in BC. One of the initiatives being supported by COAST is the commercialisation of these blue carbon or marine carbon dioxide removal technologies. I'll let our panelists explain a little bit more about blue carbon. They'll do a much better job than I will. But I like to think of it as essentially enhancing the ability of the ocean to absorb and store carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. We already know that the ocean naturally acts as a carbon sink, and it helps regulate the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, but it has the potential to do a lot more in this space. So this blue carbon not only represents an economic opportunity for the world, but also this region, because there's a lot of new technologies and innovation occurring, but it's also a key strategy in reducing the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So to help us explain more about the exciting opportunity that blue carbon presents for BC and Greater Victoria, we have a fantastic panel of experts with a wide breadth of experience and different perspectives. Chantelle Carden leads the carbon management portfolio at the BC Centre for Innovation and Clean Energy. She has the extensive background in carbon management systems, carbon credit systems, biofuels and hydrogen, working with the private and public sector for the last decade. In March 2023, she also led the development of the BC Carbon Management Blueprint. From Ocean Networks Canada, we have Dr. Kohen Bauer, who's a marine biogeochemist. Sorry, Kohen, I got it out there, and a senior staff scientist. He has a background in geology, oceanography, geochemistry, and microbiology. His research aims to create robust qualitative and quantitative models of Earth system processes in past, present, and future scenarios. Finally, Mike Kelland, who is the co-founder and CEO of Planetary. Planetary's vision is to restore and protect the ocean and climate for generations to come, and is dedicated to leading the change in marine carbon dioxide removal, which is an area of immense potential in the fight against climate change. So first of all, welcome Chantelle, Kohen and Mike, and thank you so much for providing or sharing your time today to talk about this opportunity.
Thank you.
First up, Chantelle, I introduced you first, so you're going to get the first question. Can you tell us a little bit about the carbon market, and then also maybe move into what CICE, Centre for Innovation and Clean Energy, is focused on in the carbon sector?
Thanks, Jason. To explain the carbon market, I think we'll need more than an hour, but I'll try to summarize this in maybe about 2 minutes. So the carbon markets are essentially a mechanism for companies to meet emission targets by rewarding those that reduce or remove emissions, such as cases like Planetary. So this market-based approach is aimed at encouraging the development and adoption of cleaner technologies and practices that ultimately help to mitigate climate change. So carbon markets provide a mechanism for governments to achieve emission reductions in a cost-effective manner, typically. I should also note that there's various types of carbon markets between the compliance market and the voluntary market. The compliant market is more of a regulated market by government jurisdictions, and the voluntary market, which is unregulated, but it follows a set of standards established by third parties, usually. This gets a little bit complex, as I mentioned, but I should also note there's a volatility to the market based on the methods in which they actually validate that these emission reductions and removals are actually happening. So this is a really key component to the validity of carbon markets and the growth of them. So the potential of this is growing. Reports have stated that carbon credits could be worth up to $50 to $80 billion by 2030. Now, the role that CICE plays is bringing innovation to scale with regards to supporting solutions that may fit within the carbon credit market mechanism. We do this by focusing across 4 focus areas at CICE of decarbonization. So we look at battery and energy storage solutions, low carbon fuel solutions, low carbon hydrogen solutions, and then really relevant to today's conversation, carbon management, which includes marine decarbonization solutions and marine carbon removal solutions, which can produce credits as a revenue. A little bit about CICE is that we were established through a public-private partnership. We are the largest early-stage climate tech funder in British Columbia, and we're the first funders in the province to prioritize hybrid and nature-based carbon solutions as priorities within our calls for innovation. So while we aren't a carbon credit registry or credit purchasers, we do allocate non-diluted investments towards solutions that have revenue from these credits. I may actually also push this question to Mike, as he could add a little bit more experience to this because you've actually sold credits within the space. But yeah, in terms of what the carbon credit market is, hopefully that helps kind of lineate what we're looking at for the potential of the market itself.
Perfect. So yeah, I mean, that took an hour down to 2 minutes. Perfect. Well done. Thanks, Chantelle.
Of course.
And you've just made a perfect segue into Mike. My next question was going to be directed to him. So Chantelle explained, the carbon market's a wide, large thing, but what's the ocean's role in this carbon market opportunity? And then maybe if you can expand that into what Planetary specifically is focused on to take advantage of that.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, awesome segue. So Planetary, what we're doing, I'll walk you through what Planetary is doing first, but just to say on the carbon market side of things, as Chantelle says, it's such a huge topic, and there is so many different sort of aspects of that in compliance markets, voluntary markets. There's even sort of call it, kind of hidden markets where it's like one-to-one, where it's not really a market. It's just like, a company selling credits to another company who just decides they want to buy them. And in terms of oceans right now, we're not like it's early days in the carbon markets for oceans. And the big reason for that, I think, my personal opinion, is that, we live on land, and we're starting to get to the point now where, really carbon markets are starting to become very, very important. They're growing rapidly. We've been Obviously, it's going to be a big piece of solving for climate change is removing carbon from the atmosphere. And the oceans are the highest scale potential solution that we have by a wide margin. Sort of the oceans are 2/3 of the Earth's surface. They store about 88% of the carbon. So it's really the big scale solution. But from a carbon markets perspective, it's relatively new because we just have not developed it as much as we've developed something like, forestry, for example. And that makes sense. We're much more familiar with trees. We live on land and all these things. So this is something that we've got to sort of develop as we go. What Planetary does is, I always find it's easiest to sort of think of this as in simple terms, which is that if you take climate change and you say, what really is causing climate change? Well, it's all this CO2 that's going into the atmosphere. When we look at CO2, it is actually a really fairly simple thing. It's a very mild acid. So you can, in some ways, think about climate change as the biggest acid spill that we've ever kind of executed as humanity. We're spilling all this acid into the atmosphere. And what's really interesting is that the ocean and the atmosphere are holistic, sort of connected systems. They don't live apart from each other. They're very, very sort of connected in terms of how they work. So whenever we spill acid into the atmosphere, we equally spill it into the ocean, and it sort of, some of it ends up in the ocean as a result. So what Planetary does, very simply, is we take an antacid and we soak up some of that extra acid in the ocean. And because those systems are connected, that makes more room for more CO2 to come out of the air. And that's what helps with climate change. So the simple act of kind of cleaning up that acidic waste, essentially, in the ocean, in the same way as we would clean up an acidic waste anywhere else on Earth, enables us to sort of take that out of the system and store it away permanently within the chemistry of the ocean. From a carbon market perspective, we're right now at the stage where we're transitioning from that hidden market where we have very, very well-informed, buyers who want to be catalytic at the front end of what they're doing, and who are able to do the diligence to make sure that those removals are actually happening, that the science is sound, and all those kinds of things. And we're transitioning into that voluntary market that Chantelle described. So right now, what's happening is that protocols, what are called protocols, which are essentially the agreed upon ways that we measure the carbon removed, are being published into these voluntary markets right now, so that credits can be generated and used in a high integrity and high quality way. So that's the stage we're at right now. And then that'll progress forward, obviously, as that market develops and as we move into the compliance markets, the regulatory markets, and all of those kinds of things.
So it's probably fair to say, I mean, not only are we at the early stages of, figuring out the ocean's role in this concept, but also in the market itself. And there's work. We're right at the forefront of where this could go.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely.
Okay, Kohen, I'm going to switch over to you if that's okay. Ocean Networks Canada. Most of our viewers will probably be aware of Ocean Networks Canada, based here in Greater Victoria. Fantastic organisation. I know from talking with people at Ocean Networks Canada that they're pushing a big push on blue carbon or marine carbon dioxide removal. Can you maybe give us a bit of an intro to why it is such a big push from ONC's perspective? And then also, what are the different types of technologies that ONC is seeing that can act towards this blue carbon approach?
Yeah, absolutely. So just a brief intro to ONC for those that may not know is our organization runs, maintains, and operates a large ocean observing network. So primarily this takes the shape of ocean instrumentation that is actually in situ in marine environments, making real-time measurements of ocean ecosystems. And actually, these systems are largely connected to the internet. So all of this data, our image, our view of the status of the ocean every second is available to anyone around the world in near real time. And so, yeah, I mean, Ocean Networks Canada has really recognized that our infrastructure, our observatories can really be leveraged to understand to kind of scale or perform support responsible research and development in the marine carbon dioxide removal space. And simply put, why we think this is important is climate change is the existential threat that is facing humanity today, one of society's greatest challenges, right? And so, creating the foundational knowledge of how it's impacting our oceans is step one, but also using our infrastructure to potentially support responsible research and development amongst solutions that will, provide or go in the direction of climate change mitigation. And so the second question, Jason, was about what are the pathways for marine carbon dioxide removal? And really there's many different versions of marine carbon dioxide removal, but Ocean Networks Canada is really focused on what we would call nature-based pathways. So these are natural, physical, and biogeochemical cycles that exist in our oceans today. And the specific technologies actually leverage these different biogeochemical cycles and aim to enhance them such that more, as Mike was explaining, more CO2 is transferred from the atmosphere to the ocean and stored in a safe way. And so there's a couple pathways of which you can do this. The one that Mike was describing is known as ocean alkalinity enhancement, adding base to seawater. There's other pathways that are leveraging biological systems. When you generate organic carbon or things grow in the ocean, they use photosynthesis, which pulls CO2 out of the atmosphere as well. And then there's other pathways such as restoring blue carbon ecosystems, right? As well as thinking about how we can potentially fertilize regions of the ocean to stimulate biological productivity. All this to say, Ocean Networks Canada has ocean observing infrastructure in all the regions in coastal BC, as well as in the offshore Northeast Pacific. And we can use these tools to observe these processes in real time and really make informed decisions about the efficacy of some of these techniques.
Thank you. I mean, it's. I think we'll get a little bit back into that later in terms of why is this region such an attractive proposition for these technologies. But I just wanted to just quickly go back to Chantelle. You get to see a lot of. You mentioned CICE supports companies growing in this sector, and you want to be there to support them. What type of companies are you seeing that are involved in the carbon sector at the moment?
Yeah, Jason, great question. So, of course, we have the opportunity to kind of work with dozens of innovators in this space, and we've seen a number of solutions across the entire value chain come through to CICE. But that being said, we're actually seeing a number of marine carbon removal solutions come through. In general, just the growth of nature-based solutions actually increasing from our likes at sea here at CICE. As part of our investment framework, I'll speak on this a little bit. We completed 2 reports that identified marine carbon removal solutions, and the most recent report that we released, I guess, about a month ago, it identified marine carbon removal solutions as near-term solutions for scaling, including Planetary's technologies, ocean alkalinity enhancement. So right now in our portfolio, we have Cascadia seaweed. They're based here in the Greater Victoria region. I'm sure everyone here is very familiar with them. That project is currently led by our teammate, Ashley Callister, who's bringing their project to fruition out in the area of Sydney. So Cascadia, they're cultivating local species of seaweed at scale on low impact ocean farms, and they're processing it into products for crop and cattle farmers. So it's the type of projects that we're seeing of utilizing nature-based solutions for either end products and or hybrid technologies such as Planetary. And then another aspect that we're actually seeing are technologies that are with the measuring, monitoring, reporting and verification space. So technologies that are actually innovating solutions to verify carbon reductions, removals, and avoidances, exactly of the work that ONC is leading. They're an expert in this field within the region, but we're seeing a lot of essentially technologies that are being assessed here in British Columbia for use for marine carbon removal solutions to actually verify that these technologies are in fact removing and reducing emissions from the atmosphere and in terms in the ocean as well.
Okay, so and a lot of these companies are pretty early stage, and in that early stage of development. Is that fair?
Absolutely, yeah. For us, we focus on a TRL 4 to 9, but we are seeing earlier stage, especially with regards to the MMV, about a 4 to 5 range. But it's something that we're super eager to see, and MMV is an area that we're really trying to focus on as well. Because to Mike's point, validating these technologies is key to 1, bringing revenue, and then 2, also actually reaching those target emissions. So it's something that we see as a really key piece to the value chain.
So then, I mean, that's a good question back to Mike. You're in this process of proving out your technology, demonstrating that it works, getting the measuring, monitoring, and verification (MMV) side of it completed. Why is BC and this region an attractive proposition to do that testing and proving out the technology?
Mainly because of, well, you three. But apart from that, and I'm not really kidding, right? Like, I think that one of the big things that we see is the support is massive. And, people like Chantelle, yourself, Jason, and Kohen, and the organizations there are very supportive to developing this. But even beyond that, I think there's a couple of really key things in BC on the coast that are really interesting. So when you're doing this kind of work and you're working on MRV or MMV sort of processes, and you want to prove that the carbon is actually coming out of the air, the oceanographic conditions matter, right? So where you do this really has a huge impact. One of the things that has been, I would say, challenging for these kinds of pathways is that often people take a top-down view and they say, oh, well, if you tried to do this in the open ocean, it's really difficult to measure this. But if you try to do it in the Salish Sea, our sort of hypothesis is actually it's quite easy to measure it at that point. There is a certain amount of oceanographic conditions that keeps things fairly concentrated in that area, and not concentrated to the point where it becomes dangerous, but concentrated to the point where it's measurable and we can start to sort of have a lot more understanding of it. So the oceanographic conditions really do matter in terms of our confidence level on that MRV side of things. And that's one thing that's really important to keep in mind. I think the other one is, this, like I say, this support. One of the things that we look at with a region that has such high class institutions around it, like BC, is that you have these really incredible baseline of work, whether that is sort of a baseline understanding of the chemical markers of the local ocean or the biology and all these kinds of things, so you could really understand what exists already and what you're doing and how that might impact anything, right? It allows you to be very safe in terms of what we're doing. We understand the region very well. And then from a modeling perspective, Ocean Networks Canada and UBC, all of the sensor systems that Kohen mentioned, like on top of the biogeochemical modeling that's been done in the region, you've got this very strong understanding that as you're developing a technology like this, is sort of a huge platform to stand on, right? You don't have to build that. It's there already, and that work has been done, and it's really well understood. So that's a really big deal. But one of the final things that I think people often don't maybe appreciate is that when you're doing work like this, you also want to create a situation or go into a situation rather, where you're providing a benefit that's beyond your own goals and outcomes. And in that region, in BC, what we have is we have a real challenge with ocean acidification. Ocean acidification has been called out as one of the top threats in the province. It's a threat to the shellfish industry and the fishing industry in general. And it's really acute there. So one of the things we face in developing these technologies is that we can talk about solving a global issue, and we can walk into, we've got the highest of intent around solving a global issue, but global issues get solved locally. And so if we're working in an area locally where we can also help to solve a local issue, then we have a much higher success rate fundamentally. We have more active participation with the communities that we work with and more active interest that we can engage with. And it becomes a situation where we can invest in creating a co-design and a co-development of these systems with local stakeholders, rights holders, and communities that is very very in terms of what we're doing. So there's a huge number of reasons why BC is amazing for this. Yeah, I'll come back around. I think, the three organizations represented on this call are also, a huge part of that as well.
Well, I think you summed it up really well there, and that's what we're trying to position, BC and this region to be, is that, we have the support networks, we have the infrastructure, we have the desire to do this. So it becomes that attractive proposition. Just on the infrastructure, I just want to go back to Kohen, because I know you talked a little bit about the infrastructure the ONC has, but it is pretty impressive that we have this right here on our doorstep, and it's something that needs to be shared a lot more out, because the becomes a big attraction for companies like Mike to set up here to utilize that. And Mike talked about the baseline understanding. Maybe Kohen, if you can share what ONC focuses on in that R&D purpose, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think ONC is supporting these efforts in primarily two ways. And the first way, which is the main one, I think, is really in this space that we call monitoring, reporting, and verification, or MRV. And really, this is essentially establishing the guardrails for what is happening in the ocean when we're doing something to it at all different scales, right? At the trial scale, at the benchtop experimentation scale, we can really leverage our infrastructure for these observing purposes, right? And so along the TRL spectrum, at some point, a demonstration in the real world environment is necessarily going to take place, and ONC can use our observing network to really capture what that is, establish the guardrails for both the intended and possibly unintended impacts of some of these approaches, right? Importantly, we can also compare those observing trials, let's say, against established baselines, which is also critical for establishing these guardrails, let's say. I think the second important thing is really technology development, ocean sensor technology development, instrumentation that can be deployed and tested on our network, right? So then the sensors, the oceanographic sensors of the future that will help us make robust and precise measurements of the ocean carbonate system going forward will get their first start potentially on some of the ONC observatories, right? Which is super cool to be a part of some of that R&D, as you mentioned, Jason.
Thanks, Kohen. I want to go back to Chantelle. You mentioned at the start, I think you used the number between 50 and $80 billion this carbon market is predicted to be worth by 2030. Realistically, in the area, and this is sort of unprompted here, what do you think is the ability of an area like BC to have an impact on that? And that opportunity to take hold of that number?
That's a really good question. Just going back to Mike's point with regards to understanding, yes, there's a climate impact, but the co-benefits of this are, in my opinion, probably even more impactful. And BC has 25,000 kilometers of coastline. Jason, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So there's a massive opportunity for establishing marine CDR solutions and establishing BC as a leader in ocean clean tech. I mean, we have ONC to basically verify and work on testing a lot of these early stage innovations. And then we also have the opportunity to bringing in First Nation leadership and bringing in equity in much of this work. And I think that's where we can kind of see the partnerships establishing, to Mike's point. So the near-term opportunities for BC to support marine carbon dioxide removal is massive, and understanding what it's going to take. And I think in the pilot scale format that Mike is speaking to and bringing it to the local standpoint, there's a really good opportunity here, even within Victoria itself, in understanding who are the stakeholders, who are the partnerships, who's getting equity, and what are the co-benefits of this to the ecosystems in and of itself. So there's a massive opportunity here in Victoria, but there's a massive opportunity across the coast of BC in really establishing pilot testing sites and potentially bringing some of these technologies to scale as well. But yeah, I'm going to emphasize that there's a massive pathway that we can start here, because we're in the early stages, to support Indigenous-led initiatives to grow the carbon removal space, especially within the nature-based solutions and some of the hybrid technologies that we're seeing. So I think there's an opportunity for us to understand what it's going to take to get there, establishing the pathway, but establishing a partnership pathway and bringing along the stakeholders, showing the learning, showing the models that companies like ONC are doing, and really bringing along local governments, provincial governments, academia, Indigenous rights holders, in understanding what are the impacts, what are the potentials for scaling, and then really innovating on what these revenue models could look like with all of these stakeholders. We're in a really exciting space with regards to establishing a marine carbon removal industry. So why not bring along the stakeholders from day one and establish a really innovative model? So I think this is an exciting conversation that we're having, and BC's potential for this is huge, but we have to do it correctly, and we have to involve the right groups at the right time, which is at the start.
And I think I really liked, and to go back to what Mike said earlier, global issues are solved locally. And I think that could be a key mantra for this, because you're right. I mean, this will be rooted in very local solutions and local opportunities. So I think it's we'll take that one on. We're about the bottom of the hour, so I did notice we have one question from the audience. I would encourage people, if they would like to post some questions, to post them. I'm going to share this one. I'm actually going to push this one perhaps to Mike. And that is about the biggest concern or challenge with blue carbon technologies, and what are some of the solutions around those?
Well, I mean, I can talk specifically to our pathway, and then, maybe Chantelle or Kohen could probably talk about, the other pathways and things like that. I don't want to speak on behalf of anything else. Challenges are, with any new sort of process, there's, infinite challenges fundamentally. And the fun is in sort of uncovering them and working your way through them. I think that in our space, what I see as the biggest challenge is essentially building the kind of partnerships that Chantelle described. And I would come back around to that over and over again. What we're doing is novel and new. I like to, I was looking this up the other day. Back in 1825, when locomotives first came out, there was a guy, Dionysius Lander, something like that. And he was a well-known thought leader in areas of matters of science at the time. And he published this thing, and he said, if these trains with their open carriages go more than 25 miles an hour through a tunnel, everybody's going to die. They're going to asphyxiate and die on these trains. And it was we think about train travel now, and we're like, well, how would anybody have been upset about that when it first came out? But this is true of everything, right? Every new thing elicits a response of some kind. Some people get very excited and hopeful about it, and some people get scared of everything new. And honestly, that's a good thing, right? We have whenever we're introducing something new, a new technology, we want to have a moment to sit back and say, are we truly understanding the risks and the benefits of this particular technology and what we're doing? And I think that is a wonderful thing. The challenge arises often when we overemphasize those risks versus the potential benefits, or we ignore the benefits or the risk of not doing something as we go. And so with this pathway, like a lot of new technologies that we bring out there, and especially ones that operate in the global commons, in the natural world, we absolutely have to chart a course that tracks the middle line, right? We essentially need to be able to do this in a productive way, in a way that is safe, that is incredibly well monitored. The work that Kohen's doing with Ocean Networks Canada and all that baselining and everything we do like that is very important. And we have to do it in a way that's collaborative, brings in both Western knowledge and traditional knowledge and what it's doing, all of these kinds of things. But we have to do it, and we have to do it in the way that basically, if we don't today go out there and investigate these solutions, what the IPCC tells us and what all of the various climate models tell us is that we're going to be putting ourselves at significant risk. And the scale potential of these solutions is such that we have to test them out. We have to try them. We have to get to a point where we understand, is this viable? Will it reach its potential? Can it be done safely, and at what scale? And that requires us to work in the world. And it requires us to work with people, and it requires us to engage as a community to do that. So to me, that's probably the hardest part of all of this. It's very easy for us, I think, to sit in the lab and be scientists about it and be like, hey, look, this is amazing, it works. But when we get out into the world, that's where we have to take a very different view and make sure that we are doing this in a way that people can engage with and understand and can sort of productively learn along with us is what I would say is kind of the biggest challenge. The other things, I mean, often we talk about MRV a lot. I think I'm a little bit of an outlier here because I don't think MRV is actually that big of a problem. It's important, it's absolutely critical, but a lot of the concerns about MRV, I think, are placed around issues with doing this at very large scales in the open ocean, and we're not really anywhere near that, right? So when we work coastally, MRV actually becomes, I think, a lot simpler in terms of what we've seen so far. From a regulatory perspective, at least for our pathway, tends to be very easy to regulate because what we're doing is something that is done, all day, every day in wastewater settings, in aquaculture settings, all of those kinds of things. So the regulators actually are very, very familiar with adding, an antacid to seawater, and they know the limits. They know, sort of the risks and the challenges. They understand how to regulate that in a very, very safe and clean way. And so that tends not to be for what we're doing in particular to be a big challenge in the whole thing.
Okay, thank you. Kohen, do you want to maybe add to that from your perspective?
Sure. I think, what makes my role challenging or my job challenging is that the ocean is a highly dynamic place and it's changing, and actually observing and measuring the ocean is difficult, right? And so that is what makes my job challenging, but also super fun, right? And it's really about designing these ocean observing systems and walking this line between ensuring that they capture as much of the picture as possible and in constraining what's happening in those environments while potentially making progress on some of these solutions, right? And so we need to strike that balance between creating foundational knowledge about what happens in the ocean environment, and then also what are some of the impacts of applying some of these technologies within these contexts, right? And so those are the ocean observing systems and experiments that I'm interested in designing.
Okay, and then Chantelle, I'll come to you last on this, but I was hoping that you might not just focus on the blue carbon solutions, but what are maybe some of the challenges for carbon market solutions at the moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, I'm going to echo Mike's point on the fine lines of doing something and not doing something. So at CICE, we really make urgent investment decisions, but informed investment decisions. And we want to emphasize that there is a sense of urgency, and there's a sense of urgency if we don't do something. So moving forward with pilots and testing is something that we see as extremely vital and something that we're happy to support in terms of the early stage funding. With regards to where we see the concerns or challenges around carbon removal, last week, Mike, was it last week, Carbon Removal Day? Yeah, oh my gosh, it feels like a month ago. So last week was Carbon Removal Day in Ottawa. Numerous value chain participants across the carbon removal chain got to participate. And I asked someone from the DOE, which is one of the largest carbon management funding supporters in North America, where should non-diluted investment focus their investments on? So keep in mind, CICE does non-diluted investment. For those who are unaware of what that is a fancy word for granting. So where should non-diluted investments focus their efforts on to support carbon management and carbon removal to scale? And to go back to Mike's point, they answered community engagement. And I used to argue, to Mike's point, MRV was one of the big ones that we wanted to focus on, so much so that we actually did a measuring, monitoring, and verification call. But as we work through proponents in these early stage pilot scales, we're really seeing that community engagement and investing in proper community engagement pathways and campaigns is really vital to the viability of these projects and understanding what are the risks, what are the potential revenue generators, who are the project partners, and how can the industry move along together in this, and what is that going to take? And so with our investments and what we do, we actually have innovators really think about that a community engagement piece with regards to their project pilot or their project demonstration, and how they're pulling along stakeholders to essentially learn the learnings that they're doing in their developments and how that's going to move the innovators forward. Regardless if these projects fail or move forward in success, there is an opportunity to learn, and it's an opportunity to bring the community along in those learnings. And that's something that we're emphasizing on, because we see that community engagement is expensive. Hosting community workshops is expensive. Bringing in consultants is expensive, and doing proper engagement is highly resource constraining. And if you're a technology developer like Planetary, there's budget constraints, right? So you can't spend millions of dollars doing community engagement, but there's an opportunity for non-diluted investment to support that work. And so we actually see community engagement as, at least in carbon management, being a challenge for a lot of these innovators because they're not putting those in their budget timelines. So it's something that we can see as supporting and bringing along the entire industry at the same time. So it's something that we're thinking about and how we can support all of the industry players in carbon management with regards to how they're engaging the community, to all the stakeholders involved in the project and those who aren't even affected by the project, but bringing along those learnings.
Okay, it's an interesting point, and one that I think should be resonated here as well. And Mike, you mentioned earlier about having the organisations like CICE and ONC, and then having some community engagement and invested communities in the sector, in the region as well. So I think, we've got the straw pieces for it here in BC. We just have to pull it all together. I'm actually going to come back to you, Chantelle. So this carbon market opportunity, I keep coming back to this market opportunity. What is the longevity of some of these companies? And maybe Mike, just block your ears or come back to it. But what is the longevity of feels to me that if we make the solution and find the solution, you're almost working yourself out of work. But I think we've got a long way to go, if that's fair to say. So are you seeing opportunities that these companies will be around for a long time in improving their technology and scaling up?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And Mike, you don't have to plug your ears for this one. So I see carbon reduction based and carbon removal based technologies as maintaining longevity, regardless of carbon markets. We're reaching the points where we need to decarbonize a number of industries to reach emission targets. So I wouldn't be in the job that I'm in if I didn't believe in the longevity of these decarbonization technologies. And CICE is absolutely betting on the long-term viability of these technologies. I think in the near future, we're going to see technologies partnering with industry partners by providing a fee for service in the near future, and maybe coinciding that with the carbon markets in place. So yes, there's a place for carbon market revenue, but as I stated, I think we're going to see industry decarbonizing and the needs of that growing. And so I think there's going to be a fee for service amongst the carbon management value chain, not just nature-based solutions, hybrid, but technologies. There's going to be a fee for service in the near future for a lot of these technologies. So irregardless of the carbon markets, there's going to be a market long-term, especially as we see these technologies scale. And I think, once again, BC has a major opportunity to hosting a number of these pilot projects and technology developments, especially within the marine solution. So if we can actually prove those out here, there's an opportunity that we could bring them to scale and create a really solid business model beyond carbon markets. But I'd really be interested to kind of see Kohen and Mike's take on this and where they see the longevity of these projects. But once again, we're betting on this, and it's something that I'm going to see, well, hopefully I'm going to see in the long term, regardless of where the carbon markets go on a compliance or voluntary level.
Perfect. Mike and Kohen.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with you. And speaking from an ocean observing perspective, from a foundational knowledge creation perspective, there's always something we can learn, right? And so, our role in this is to observe the ocean system, and I mean, in that sense, and the things that we use it for, and that we do in that context. And so long as the ocean exists, the ocean will be there to also observe it. So, I mean, I think that's our role in the space is going to continue to grow, because Yeah, it's an exciting opportunity, and the scientific questions that are tethered to some of these solutions are also super interesting. And so there's speaking of co-benefits, there's exciting new knowledge to create and then also benefit humanity in the long run. So it's a double win from people that like me who study these natural cycles, right?
And yeah, and maybe I'll just throw in our take on carbon removal versus sort of carbon reduction, right? Because often we think about those things kind of together. Most of the compliance markets in carbon right now are actually carbon reduction markets. They're what's called offset markets. And on the voluntary side, it's more sort of what we would call removals. And they get lumped together, but they're actually very different things. So, and it speaks to longevity. So I always kind of use the analogy that reducing carbon in the system tends to be kind of like curing a disease, right? When I go out there and I replace a gas-fired power plant with solar and wind and batteries, I'm actually just removing that emission, and it's not going to emit anymore, right? It doesn't exist anymore, so it's not going to emit anymore. I've cured that particular emission in the system. When we talk about carbon removal, we're actually talking about a treatment. And it's not a cure. It's sort of like, you know, you've got a chronic condition. Hey, Earth, you've got a chronic condition here, and we've got to treat that pretty much forever. And that's what all of the IPCC models say. So what's really interesting is that, and the numbers are kind of easy to conceptualize. We've got sort of 45-ish billion tons a year we emit right now. And we probably by 2050 can take that down to about 5, right? If we do everything humanly possible to like reduce emissions like right now. So like stop what you're doing, go do some emissions because we've got to do it right now. But like if we can drop that curve from that 45-ish down to 5 by 2050, that's probably all we're going to be able to do. As Chantelle says, there's what are called unabatable emissions within the system. If we want to continue our way of life, if we want to continue to do agriculture, things like this, there's stuff we're never going to get out of there. We get down to that 5. What we have to do then is we have to take out every year from then on with the stuff we can't cure, we got to treat. So we've got to get the other 5 out. And that 5 billion tons a year gets you to what's called net zero. So 0 versus net zero, that's sort of the difference. You've got 5 and we've got to remove 5. 5 emitted, 5 removed is net zero. But what the other piece of the equation is, we actually have to also remove legacy emissions. So the emissions that we are kind of in a way, even looking forward, we're going to be over budget, right? And so we have to remove the stuff that we've already put up there. And that's another 5 on average. And so what you end up with is that from 2050 to 2100, we need to be removing about 10 gigatons a year. And we don't ever really stop doing that. So when we're building out these businesses, we have to think in that kind of mentality. And to give a sense of scale, like, because we talk about gigatons all the time, a gigatons or a billion tons, the oil industry, crude oil right now, there's about 2.1 billion tons of crude oil that's extracted every year. And so one of the ways to conceptualize that is like, we have to remove 5, maybe 3 to 5 times as much volume of stuff out of the atmosphere every year as the current oil industry extracts. You can sort of say, well, like, so what does that mean? Well, it means we need to make a CDR industry that's, 3-ish times the size of the current oil industry in about 26 years. It's a monumental undertaking. We have the scale of the problem is just unbelievable. And so when we look at these businesses and the longevity of these businesses on the CDR side of things, these businesses have to last and the pathways have to last. And we have to go out and investigate these things because we really don't have a lot of time to figure out what works well and what doesn't. When it comes to oceans, as I say, it's critically important that we sort of go down the path of investigating these things and do it as safely and as quickly as we can, because they appear to be, based on what we know today. And this is, Kohen can sort of help me out with the uncertainty language that, the science community is very good at sort of couching things. But at the end of the day, the potential, what it looks like from where we are right now, is that this is the highest scale potential solution that we have. And so we have to go out there and, responsibly, carefully, but we have to come together in order to investigate this as quickly as we can.
So we've got about 3 or 4 minutes left. I'm just going to come back to each person on a couple of things that they mentioned. So Kohen, I'm going to start with you. You talked about new knowledge, building up new knowledge. It feels to me like there is a huge potential here in the ocean sector, using what we have knowledge now to focus on research and development. Is it fair to say that, you know, we're in that position right now, we're at that stage that there is a massive requirement for better understanding?
Absolutely. And I'll just share a quick anecdote here. I just got back from New Orleans in February, where there was the largest, one of the largest, if not the largest, gathering of marine scientists in all disciplines. It's a conference called Ocean Sciences Meeting. And the previous one was 4 years ago. And at that previous one 4 years ago, you know, marine carbon dioxide removal and the acronym mCDR didn't really exist, almost, let's say. And then this year, there was multiple days across this 5-day conference that were almost exclusively dedicated to this topic. So this is the marine science community talking about this at the most important gathering of scientists that we have every 2 years at this meeting. So I'll say yes, there's a lot of excitement and a lot to learn, let's say. So.
And then moving to Chantelle, you're obviously seeing it with the companies coming through CICE that, you know, not only is there the interest, there's the companies being developed, the intellectual property being identified to take these challenges on, and the support that you've got. So this marine ocean carbon dioxide removal is a key opportunity.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you look at our CDR report that we just acknowledged, bringing 10 gigatons of carbon removal to scale is a big challenge. And the thesis that we underlied basically showed that we need to use nature-based solutions and leverage those nature-based solutions that are already naturally absorbing and removing carbon. So why not, instead of creating, well, we can still focus on technology and engineered solutions, but why not in the short term focus on leveraging nature-based solutions and accelerating their ability to remove and absorb carbon? And that's exactly why we're having this conversation, is that there's a massive opportunity. And now that we've kind of launched and released this report, our next call, which will be in June, we're going to prioritize looking at marine CDR solutions as a potential pathway for scale for BC and even down here on the coast, and just bringing pilots and acknowledging what it's going to take and what is the ability of scaling some of these technologies. So it's something that we want to prioritize in our funding, even coming this year. So it's an exciting opportunity. It's something that we really see as an area of interest for BC itself.
Finally, and then Mike, back to you. What are you talked about communities, we talked about community engagement, but what are the opportunities for the communities to get involved in this? Job opportunities, you know, what are the sort of ground opportunities that we could see with these technologies?
I think that this is one of those things that is very cross-cutting in terms of the potential opportunities for people to participate. And it's, you know, we're not going to do, you know, 2 to 3 times the size of the oil industry alone, right? Like that is, you know, something that takes participation from every aspect of the community. So, you know, in the work we've done so far, everything from, you know, fishermen getting involved in, or fishers getting involved in, you know, working with us on, you know, surveys and things like this. They understand the region, they know what's going on, they know where things happen, all that kind of stuff. People getting involved in terms of, you know, engaging in the conversation about this is really important. But I think that there's jobs, there's opportunities across the entire value chain of the work that we're doing here. And it's a really big opportunity. It's not often that we have to create an industry from scratch, where we sort of have this obligation as well as an opportunity. And at the scale that we're going to get to, there's everything from, oh, I want to go into ocean sciences and study this and work on this, which is a huge area of growth, I think, in the space right now, all the way out to, like, I just want to understand it and, you know, be part of it from that perspective. I want to understand how we maybe regulate it, how we scale it out, how we engage in it from an engineering perspective. And I think it's going to be a really fertile area for innovation. Chantelle's already probably 6 steps ahead of me on this, right? Where we have companies that are going to participate in this space, in sensors, in robotics, in drones, in software, in materials processing, in mineralogy. Like, there's so many fields that get involved in just even our little pathway on this that, it's going to have a wide scope and a lot of opportunity that emerge.
Thank you, Mike. And a great way to summarize. I'm not going to do any summaries because you guys have done a fantastic job for me. I know I'm biased, but I think this is a huge opportunity for the region. I think we'll see some amazing things happening. Chantelle, you mentioned about CIC's call later this year. That's fantastic. I just see that the swell of opportunity is massive. So I appreciate your time today. Thank you. We could have this discussion forever, I'm sure. And it will be continued at other times, but thank you again for participating. Chantelle, Carden, Kohen, Bauer, and Mike Kelland.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jason, and nice chatting with you.
Thank you, and thank you for watching. I'll pass it back to our host or our operator. Thank you.
Great. Thank you to the speakers for participating. We'd like to thank the Esquimalt Chamber of Commerce for sponsoring this important conversation. We'd also like to thank our presenting sponsor, RBC, and Catalyst sponsor, Van City, for supporting Rising Economy 2024 in partnership with Pacifican. We also encourage attendees to head back to the Whova platform to continue the conversation. There, you can check out the event agenda and upcoming sessions, head to the community section to check out exhibitor booths, and join virtual meetups and engage in discussions. The more you engage with the platform, the more points you earn, increasing your chances of winning one of our prizes, which include a small business gift certificate and books by our keynote speakers. Make sure you check your score on the Apps leaderboard throughout the event. Coming up next, we have Reinventing Economic Development at 1 p.m. Thank you and goodbye.